Musa, that was the time most complete, most similar to Yemais HaMashiach. And indeed, it took another 15 generations from Shloimeh. It was there 30 generations in Eretz Yisrael when the moon is hidden, and that's when the Churban Habayis took place, and that's when the Golus began. But Shloimeh didn't know that was going to happen. Shloimeh made the mistake of thinking this was Yemais HaMashiach. And if the life of David is an example to Golus, then the experience of Shloimeh right at the beginning of his time, of him making the mistake of thinking that the time of Mashiach had arrived, then that certainly is also a perfect example for the Golus experience. And it's a warning for the Golus experience. Because throughout the Golus, generation after generation, Jews have suffered from Mashiachei Sheker, from false messiahs, from false Moshiachs, some who are outright charlatans, outright fakers, some who are even great people and made the mistake of telling their people that Kevar Higia, that it's already the time for Yemais HaMashiach. This has happened time and time again, starting from the Zman of Bar Kochva, the time of Rebbe Akiva, Milanu Gadol Rebbe Akiva, and he made the mistake of thinking that Bar Kochva was a Mashiach, until later he retracted. And the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah Daf Tes, there was an Amayra who said that at a certain year, 400 years after the Churban, if someone's willing to sell you land in Bavel, a big piece of land for 1 shekel, don't buy it. Rashi says, La malacha lahafzir ha-shekel, Mashiach will certainly come. And so too, throughout the generations, the Rambam in Igeres Teiman, in the 12th century, the Rambam writes about a Mashiach who was Mechayim Eisim. The story that went around was that he was Mechayim Eisim. And he writes also about a false Mashiach. The Rashba in his time had to stop a person who was even a gadol in his dar, Rabbi Avram Abu Lifa, who in Spain, many of the Sephardic countries, who went around prophesying that Mashiach was about to come. And the Rashba had to get up and publicly make a machlokes in order to stop it. And certainly the most famous Mashiach Sheker was shabtai tZvi, at least in Ashkenazic circles, was shabtai tZvi in the 17th century. Shabtai tZvi, who fooled the world. We know much about it from a diary of a young girl that we have from that time period. And she writes about the fervor that took place in Europe at the time of Shabtai tZvi. Shabtai tZvi was a person who was a big Talmid Chacham, but certainly a very strange person. At the age of 20, he had already been married twice and divorced twice. And he was able to fool Yidden into thinking that it was Yemais HaMashiach. He was thrown out of one town after another, but he kept on going. And he traveled all over Europe until he came to Cairo and he hit pay dirt. There was an Adam Gadol in Cairo, a Rav who believed him. And he went from there to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim at that time was a very poor city. And he brought along money from Cairo, from the Jews in Egypt. And he bought off the hearts of Anshe Yerushalayim. And he was actually able to fool them into thinking that Mashiach had come, that he was Mashiach. And much of Europe, this is not something that took place for a year or two. This took place for almost 20 years, where he ran around and he was convincing people he's Mashiach. The problem was, you can't be Mashiach too long without doing something. So eventually he had to do something. One year, he got up, he made the bracha publicly, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, Matir Asurim, and he was Matir a lot of Isurim. He said that you don't have to fast anymore on Tisha B'Av, you don't have to fast on Asara B'Tevis, it's already the time of the Geula. And once he started that, he started being Matir other Isurim. So that's when the Rabbanim of his time stood up against him. But they had a very difficult time. They were really saved by the Turks, because the Turks took Shabtai tZvi and they put him in jail. And they said they'd kill him unless he converted to Islam. And he converted. And the Musar is that even after he converted to Islam, there was still people who believed in Shabtai tzvi was Mashiach. It's such an intoxicating idea, especially in times of trouble, that people still believed. They said that Mashiach has to be Maila Nitzaitzis, and when it's dark, you have to do Averis, to do Tshuva. They had all kinds of Pilpulim, Terutzim. This caused great trouble for Klal Yisrael even after he died. And as I say, he's probably the most famous in Ashkenazic circles. In Sephardic circles, there was a false Mashiach, a David HaReuveini, a man who came and pretended to be from the other side of Sambatyon, from the 10 Shvatim, who ran around also trying to cut a deal with the Pope to fight against the Muslims. He had no army, but he gained respect, and he ran all over, and everyone was convinced that he was from there. The problem was, once he said he was from the 10 Shvatim, he couldn't be Mashiach ben David, because he had the wrong story, so he got himself a shutif. He was Mashiach ben Yosef, he came with Mashiach ben David, and he also caused terrible, terrible sorrows. Now, the troubles caused by the false Mashiachs, it needs a hesber really. Why this always caused problems? You would think that if Mashiach is coming, it would cause people to do tshuva, people to do things right. And indeed, that's why Gedolim sometimes didn't stand up to Shabtai tzvi right away, because there were places where people were doing tshuva. But what is wrong? There must be something wrong in the concept of believing in the Mashiachs who come around, even the